Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Maple Grove Scripture Reading Podcast. So last time we finished up chapter 33, where Elihu wrapped up his first speech to Job with a summary of his whole argument that basically God doesn't stop at one attempt. He would try and reach out in dreams, in suffering, a mediating figure. Again and again, he reaches toward a person to turn them back from the pit. And then Elihu made his final appeal. If you have something to say, Job, say it. If not, be silent, and I'll teach you wisdom. And Job apparently stayed silent, and so Elihu keeps going. And so chapter 34 is his second speech. And right from the start, something shifts. So let me read through the passage first. We'll go through the first 9 verses of chapter 34. Then Elihu said, "Hear my words, you wise men. Listen to me, you men of learning. For the ear tests words as the tongue tastes food. Let us discern for ourselves what is right. Let us learn together what is good. Job says, I am innocent, but God denies me justice. Although I am right, I am considered a liar. Although I am guiltless, his arrow inflicts an incurable wound. Is there anyone like Job who drinks scorn like water? He keeps company with evildoers. He associates with the wicked, for he says there is no profit in trying to please God." So chapter 33 was addressed directly to Job. He says, "Listen to me, Job. Let me speak. Hear me out." And so it's a personal conversation. He's engaging one man with his argument. But now he turns. He addresses wise men and men of learning. And that's not Job, but the crowd. The commentators have noted that by the time of this dialogue, it was probably assumed that a group may have gathered. A dispute of this weight between a famous sufferer and 3 theologians would have drawn an audience. Elihu himself is young and has been waiting for the older men to finish, and he appears to know there are others present. And here, at the start of his second speech, he makes a direct appeal to them as his judges. He's not just talking to Job anymore. He's inviting the assembly to evaluate the argument. Think of it more as a courtroom move. He's calling on the jury. He wants the wise men in the room to listen, to weigh in on what he's about to say, and to decide. The word he uses for wise is the same kind of wisdom the book of Proverbs uses. It's practical, accumulated understanding. These are men who have lived long enough to know something, and Elihu believes his argument can stand up to their scrutiny. And so he makes his opening move. He puts forward the image Job himself had used back in chapter 12. For the ear tests words and the tongue tastes food. It's a borrowed image, which is interesting. Job said the exact same thing earlier in the book. So Elihu is essentially using Job's own standard against him. You yourself said that the ear discerns words the way the palate discerns flavor. Good. Then use that ear on what I'm about to say. Let's taste it together and see what's true. He says, let us discern for ourselves what is right. Let us learn together what is good. That invitation to collective discernment is unusual in these speeches. The 3 friends had presented their cases as established truth. They weren't inviting discussion. Elihu, whatever his faults, at least has the form of a conversation. He wants to reason together, not simply pronounce from on high. And we've already seen Elihu quote Job to his face in chapter 33. I heard the very words he said in verse 8, and then laid out Job's position precisely before responding to it. That approach set him apart from the 3 friends, as we talked about, who spent 30 chapters arguing with a version of Job that they'd constructed rather than what Job had actually said. And here, Elihu does it again, but the context is different, and the difference matters. In chapter 33, he quoted Job to Job. He was in a direct confrontation, one-on-one, arguing back to a man who was right there in the room. Here, he quotes Job to an audience. He's presenting Job's case as evidence, laying it out for the wise men to evaluate. This isn't a conversation anymore. It's closer to a public reading of the record. Job says, I am innocent, but God denies me justice. And that tracks what Job said in chapter 27, verse 2, where he says, as surely as God lives, who has denied me justice. And what he argued in chapter 13 and chapter 23. It's consistent across all of those. Although I am right, I am considered a liar. Although I am guiltless, his arrow inflicts an incurable wound. There's a commentator named Barnes who notes that this is a paraphrase of Job's position in chapter 6, where he described a deadly arrow that had pierced him. Job's argument was not that he was sinless, but that his suffering was out of proportion, that he was being treated as guilty when he wasn't, and that he couldn't lie about what he was experiencing, even if everyone was treating his testimony as false. And Elihu isn't distorting any of this, the quotes hold up, but presenting them to an audience changes what he's doing with them. In chapter 33, the point was, Job, here's what I think your argument is doing and where it's going wrong. Here, the point is, wise men, listen to what this man has been saying. Judge it. Come to a conclusion with me. So what's Elihu's objection? He doesn't dispute the facts Job has stated. He doesn't say, no, you weren't suffering, or no, your friends were right. He raises something different. He says, is there anyone like Job who drinks scorn like water? So that's really the charge. Not that Job is factually wrong about his suffering, but that Job has been drinking the language of reproach against God as though it were harmless, like water. Something that you can take in without thinking about it. He continues, he says, he keeps company with evildoers, he associates with the wicked. Now, this is not a claim that Job literally walked with criminals. It's a charge about his thinking. Job's conclusions, Elihu argues, are the same conclusions that wicked people draw. God doesn't operate fairly. Obedience produces no advantage. The universe isn't morally ordered. And according to Elihu, Job has been saying the same things. His conclusions line up with theirs, even if he arrived at them honestly through suffering rather than through rebellion. Whether that's a fair charge is going to matter. Job was responding to a real situation. The wicked arrive at those conclusions from contempt. Job arrived there from pain. But Elihu's point is that the conclusions themselves are the problem, regardless of how you got there. He says, there is no profit in trying to please God. Job had said something close to this in chapter 9. He had argued that God destroyed the blameless and the wicked alike, that God mocked the despair of the innocent, that the one who is blameless and the one who is wicked, it's all the same. What does it profit to serve God if this is the world you live in? Elihu hears that and says that's the argument of someone who has given up on a morally ordered universe. And if you give up on that, you've given up something that can't be given up. Because if there's no profit in pleasing God, then there's no reason for anyone to pursue righteousness. And the whole moral framework of creation collapses. So here's what makes this section complicated. Job wasn't wrong about everything he experienced. He really did suffer without cause. The suffering was not God punishing him for wickedness. The reader of the book knows that from the prologue. What Job said about his own innocence was correct. The three friends were wrong. But Elihu has located something real in what Job said. Not about his innocence, but about his conclusions. Job's suffering pushed him toward claims about how God operates that aren't simply personal testimony. He moved from, this is what I'm experiencing, to this is how God works with everyone. And some of those broader claims were more than what his situation could support. Elihu is saying, your suffering is real, but your argument has taken you somewhere dangerous. You've moved from describing your experience to making theological claims that undermine the whole moral order of the universe. And those two things aren't the same. It's a different kind of pushback than what we saw the friends offering. The friends told Job he was lying about his experience. Elihu is saying, I believe your experience. I'm questioning where you took it. And we're going to see in the verses that follow whether Elihu's own position holds up. He has his own blind spots in his position as well. But there's a real difference between describing what you're going through and drawing conclusions from it that flatten the character of God entirely. Job was doing some of both. Elihu has caught the second one. Whether he handles it well is the next question. So next time we'll move into Elihu's central argument, why it is not possible for God to do wrong. So that'll be in verses 10 through 20. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. God bless.